Before we come to this last message in our brief series on the life of Elisha, I would like to express our appreciation on behalf of my wife and myself for your care for us and the opportunity to fellowship with you all. And we wish we had had more days and more opportunities to sit at different ones of those and have conversations with more of you. But, perhaps the Lord will spare us, and there may be another time yet. So we'll look forward to that. As we come to this last session, we've read the chapter 2 Kings 13. Our focus is going to be on Elisha's last, as it were, his last meeting with the king of Israel, his last ministry in public, as it were, and we're going to consider what he does, what he says, and there are two characters in this story, and the focus again is verses 14. We turn to the chapter again, verse 14, down through verse 19. A relatively short passage, but there are two characters in these verses. Readily identifiable, of course, Elisha, but then there's the king of Israel, who is at this point Joash or Jehoash, two different spellings of his name. Two characters. And I'm going to violate, when we come to this passage, one of the cardinal rules of preaching. That is that every sermon should have one main point. There are two main points. So I guess I failed. But I think you'll see them. If you look at each of these characters, each of them teach us something very different. So we can't avoid those two lessons, and it's important that we get both of them. We broke the rule. Anyway, I think you'll see the two main points as we go along. Well, let's look at the narrative. Let's just run through the story and see what the main salient points are of the narrative, of the tale that's told. And first of all, we have Elisha's sickness unto death in verse 14. Elisha became sick with the illness of which he was to die. So here's Elisha on a bed. It's a deathbed scene. Deathbed scenes are sometimes tragic, sometimes extremely grievous. There's always going to be a tear. There's always going to be a sorrow of parting. But some deathbed scenes are better than others. The deathbed scene that I hope you'll agree with me is not tragic. For Elisha's side, for the king of Israel's side, it's much more so. But it's a deathbed scene. The second thing we notice is the visit of the king to the sick prophet. Now, it's important for us here that from chapter 9, verse 1, all the way down here to chapter 13, verse 14, Elisha is not mentioned at all. There's the tragic story of the queen Athaliah usurping the throne down in Judah. These are some events in history that are recounted for us in the intervening chapters, but chapter 9 verse 1 is where Elisha sends one of the sons of the prophets to anoint Jehu. This was, remember, a task assigned to Elijah, delegated to Elisha. Elisha delegates it to a son of the prophets. Let's take place. And we have the reigns of Jehu and then of his son Jehoahaz. And then after Jehoahaz, now we're in the reign of Joash. So that's quite a long span of time before we ever hear of Elisha again. If you look at it, Joash reigned for, I think it was, let me look in my notes here, written down, and of course I could find it in the scriptures, but I have it in my notes. Jehu reigned 28 years. Jehoahaz, 17 years. That's a total of 45 years. And you don't hear of Elisha in all that time. What's going on with Elisha? Is he off the scene? Is he on vacation? Is he out fishing? Is he down by the beach? What's he doing? Well, we get a hint of that in the words of King Joash when he comes to visit the prophet on his deathbed. So here he tells us, what was Elisha doing for 45 years? Joash the king comes down to him and wept over him. He sheds tears over the prostrate form of this sick prophet, sick unto death, on his deathbed, and the king bows his head and weeps. Notice his words. My father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. Does the word sound familiar? These are the same words proclaimed by Elisha himself when Elijah was taken on a chariot of fire into heaven. And these words declare the belief and the conviction that this one individual is more important in the whole nation than all the armies and all the chariots, all the horsemen that they can put in the field. What was Elisha doing in Israel for 45 years? He was the moral pillar. He was the prayer force that was sustaining Israel with the onslaught of the Syrians. Now the Syrians were, remember, commissioned to judge Israel, but not to wipe them out. To lash them, as it were, so that they would feel the lash of God and hopefully be driven to repentance. But not to wipe them out. Not yet. And it was Elisha's prayer life as a prayer warrior that was sustaining the nation. If Elisha is taken off the scene, the king of Israel fears, we're done for. Reminds me of a statement I heard once about John Knox, that Mary, Queen of Scots, feared the prayers of John Knox more than the armies of her enemies. She was afraid when John Knox got on his knees. The case here in Israel, the king of Israel knew that the prayers of Elisha for him and his kingdom were more important than all of his chariots and horsemen. My father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. Here's the nation. We were hearing earlier in the prayer time that our God is a prayer-hearing God. Now we couple that truth with the fact that our God is a throne-sitting God. That is, He is the sovereign of the universe. He holds all things in His hands. And if He hears our cry, prayer is a vital part of our work. I believe I mentioned the other day of some of these messages, I don't remember what context, whether it was from the pulpit or in conversation, these mega churches that have thousands in attendance on a Sunday morning, but don't have a prayer meeting. Where are the chariots? Where are the horsemen? Do we have great things of God? Do we attempt great things for God? Do we ask great things from God? He recognizes Elisha's importance. And remember, we read earlier in the chapter, verse 7, that the of the enemies of the king of Aram had left Jehoahaz only 10 chariots, 50 horsemen, and 10,000 footmen. This army is a shadow. It's a sliver of what it used to be. Where's the defense? It's the prayers of Elisha. Now the prophet commands the king, as the king is here visiting the sick, dying prophet, and he commands him, take a bow and arrows. Now remember, kings were warriors, and so perhaps the king had brought with him his own bow and arrows, or perhaps Elisha had one over there in the corner waiting for such a visit. But anyway, there's a bow and arrows handy, and he says, take a bow and arrows. So the king takes a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. He put his hand on it. And Elisha, leaning up in the bed, perhaps sitting up in his sick bed, puts his hands on the hands on the bow. He said, open the window toward the east. Now, I picture this. The king's got the bow, and he's got Elisha's hands on the bow. He's got to move over to the window. I don't know how he does this, whether Elisha lets go temporarily. But anyway, he opens the window to the east. And Elisha's now holding the bow with the king's hands on the bow. And he says, shoot! So the king takes an arrow in the bow, and Elisha's hand still on the king's hands. As he draws back the arrow, shoots out the window. What does this mean? Why do this? What is this, a charade? What's going on? What is it, a play acting thing? Is Elisha doing this macho business? I want to get one more shot in before I die. I want to feel the bow in my hands. What is this? Well, he tells him. There's an interpretation of this symbolic action. Look in verse 17. The Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Syria, for you shall defeat, you shall smite the Syrians at Aphek until you have destroyed them. One battle. So you're going to have this next upcoming battle at Aphek. Now that's not the end of the story. There's an interpretation. The king has every idea, every clue given to him that these actions are serious. They mean something. This isn't a play act. This isn't just a macho deal. This is for real, something that God is teaching him. Now, verse 18, Elisha says, take the arrows. And he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike or smite the ground. Now, you read this in our English Bibles and you get the picture. He's got a handful of arrows. He says, strike the ground. And so he bends over, whack, whack, whack. But that's not the case. Because the word, you shall smite the Syrians at Aphek, with the first arrow, the same word he says, smite the ground. Now, what he means is, all right, shoot and hit the ground. Shoot the arrows into the ground. So it's again shooting, same action as before. Although a different word is used, it's the word for smite Syrians. Now, takes the arrows. All right, I'll go through with this charade. But he should know. He should have gotten the clue. These are symbolic actions. If the first arrow means victory over Syria, how much victory over Syria do you want? Smite the ground. So, king, wing, wing, wing. All right, I did it. Enough's enough. Enough of this game. Sits down, perhaps by the bedside of the prophet. And the man of God was angry with him. And maybe you say, hey, take it easy. Chill out, man. You're old. You're on your deathbed. Don't get excited. You can have a heart attack there. He's angry, excited, he's worked up. And he said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck Syria until you would have destroyed it. But now you shall strike Syria only 3 times. What's wrong here? Why is he angry? Because the king, with his symbolic meaning to his actions, is not zealous. He's not really energetic in the fight. Just 3 times and he's got more arrows right there. If it were you, what would you have done? All right, well, defeat the Syrians. Bing. Defeat them again. Bing. Give them another shot. Bing. Okay, that's good enough. I don't know. I hope you would have gotten the picture already from Elisha. If we want to get these guys off our back, we help them out. Remember, it has been how many kings? Ben-Hadad, the guy before him, and now remember who was anointed in the place of, Ben-Hadad was anointed in, Hazael was anointed in the place of the previous king, and now his son is coming in the picture. All these great task in life seems to have been to prey upon Israel. Pick on little Israel. Let's get some riches off Israel. Oh, the treasure's getting a little low. Time for another raid on Israel. And Israel is just being milked dry. You would think he would say, well, I'm fed up with this business. Let's just get rid of them. Okay, they've licked me so many times, I'm going to give them all the licks I can get. I would have run out of the arrows, wouldn't you? Don't you think that the king would have some desire, some burning ambition to hit his enemies once and for all? That's what Elisha would have expected. That's what God seems to have given this opportunity for. What does the king do? Bing, bing, bing. Okay, sit down. Let's take it easy. And so Elisha is rightly angered. You should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck Syria until you would have destroyed them. But now you only get 3 victories. Well, let's go on with the story. We'll get to these events and get the lessons, soak the milk out of them. But let's push through and finish the chapter. Then we have Elisha dying and he's buried. So Elisha died, that's where he was heading, and they buried him. The raids now not just of the Syrians up in the north, but the Moabites to the southeast are also making raids. They see Israel. Their army's nothing, you know. These are the little guys on the block, and the big bullies are going to pick on every side. They've only got 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, 10,000 footmen, and they've got a big border. They can't cover the territory. So the Moabites are saying, well, we're going to get, if Syria is going to get rich off of them, we might as well take our shot too. We'll get what we can get. And so the Moabites are raiding. The Moabites are raiding in the spring of the year, and they're burying a man. Another Israelite died, and this raiding band of Moabites comes over the border. And here we have the grave diggers, you know, and they're digging the hole, and it's the Moabites! And they ditch the guy, or maybe it wasn't a grave, into the grave. There was a grave right there. Maybe it was a cave tomb. They toss the body, and the body strikes the bones of Elisha. This is one of those strange events in history. You see where maybe Catholics get the idea of venerating bones and relics? Well, if the bones of Elijah could raise people from the dead, maybe the bone of St. Peter and a sliver of the true cross and a piece of the hair of St. Margaret. But anyway, he hits the bones of Elisha, and the dead man comes to life. He probably runs after his buddies when he sees the Moabites coming. I think if I were them, I would have run even faster. But it's a strange event. Strange event. And we'll come back to it. But you ask me, why? As my friend Greg Nichols back in the U.S. answered the question, he said, I can answer any question you have for me. Wow, that sounds very cocky, doesn't it? He says, many times I'll just give you the answers. I-D-K. I don't know. Well, that's a good answer. I don't know why. I don't know why God allowed this to happen or caused this to happen. Except maybe all the more to increase the respect due for the prophet. But from there. And we have the last thing is God compassionately, Israel doesn't deserve it, this is mercy, grants them 3 victories at the hand of Jehoash over the Syrians. Verse 25. Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, took again from the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken in war from the hand of Jehoahaz his father. 3 times Joash defeated him and recovered the cities of Israel. 3 times only. And that was it. Well, that's what the chapter's about, or at least this portion from verse 14 onwards. What lessons now do we learn? As I said, there are two main lessons. One we gain from King Joash. The other we gain from dying prophet Elisha. So let's begin with the king. What lesson do we learn from King Joash and his coming to visit the dying prophet? Well, the first lesson is, and I think it's important to underscore, this is a main lesson, but it points to and it's underscoring the main lesson. This is, first little lesson, is that God uses human instruments. Here you have Jehoash. He's not a godly king. He's not as bad as he could be. He's not a Baal worshiper, but he's a golden calf worshiper. So he's not godly, but he does respect the prophet of the Most High. And even in our political situations, both in America and here in Australia, as I understand it, there have been in the past rulers who, you wouldn't have called them Christians by any sense of the meaning of the term, but they at least respected godliness and seemed to have a respect for the God of the Bible and of true religion, and at least paid lip service to it. Well, here we have a king like that. He's not a godly man. He doesn't worship Jehovah according to the word of the Lord. He respects God's prophet, weeping over him on his deathbed. God uses men. And if you look back through Bible history, you realize this, time and again, God used Abraham, a man of faith, to be the father of many nations, especially the father of the chosen nation. God used Moses to lead the people out of Egypt, across the sea, and up to the border of the promised land. Who is Moses? Is Moses this great towering giant of a man? God says to him, send you back to Egypt, you're going to bring my people out, and what does Moses say? Not me, Lord. Get somebody else to do the job. He's not a great giant of a man, but God used him. God uses frail earthen to accomplish his purpose, so that the exceeding greatness of the glory may be seen to be of God and not of man. It comes from above. Well, we could lead on. Joshua leads the army to victory. It was around Jericho. Was it the force of the arms of the Israelites? No, God makes the walls go flat. We can think of David with the giant. Was it David's skill with a sling? No, David knew it wasn't. And he said, God will give me victory. And your bones, your flesh will be eaten by the birds. David's trust was in the Lord. Think of the apostles spreading the gospel. Who were they? Oh yeah, fishermen, a tax collector, the scum of the earth. You've got people you would not expect great things from. Who are they? They're ignorant and unlearned. Even the Jews knew that. And just one illustration of this, that God uses men. Remember the household of Cornelius? Acts chapter 10. Here's a man, I think we can genuinely say, was a seeker. He wanted to know God in truth. And so he saw that the God of Israel was the true God, but that's not enough. And so God sends an angel. You know, I always marvel at this. God sends an angel to Cornelius while he's praying and says to him, send for Peter, Joppa. And so he sends to the house of Simon the Tanner at Joppa, and it's a day and a half journey, and so they get there and they stay overnight and they start coming back. So, wait a minute. Now, God, you've got an angel, a heavenly messenger. And every angel I ever saw had wings. Well, no, I never saw an angel. But they go pretty quick. You could send an angel, this is air attack, aerial forces, send the angel, and let the angel do the job. The angel told Cornelius about Jesus. Ever think of that? Why not? The angel was never saved by grace. Angel never tasted the joy of sin forgiven. But Peter had. You love me more than these? Feed my sheep. 3 times. Why 3 times? He denied the Lord 3 times. Peter knew the blessedness of sin forgiven. Send for Peter. The apostles were God's instruments in his hand to do his work. Now, let's just fast forward. Here we are, or fast backward, I guess it is. Here we are with this King Joash. Put your hands on the bow. Shoot the arrow. Shoot what? Now that's victory. Now, get the arrows, more arrows, and shoot again. Ding, ding, ding. 3. Joash is failing to recognize if God is going to grant victory, God grants victory through human instruments. And who is the great instrument, at least speaking, in Israel? It's the king, the leader. If the leader is not zealous, the leader is not energetic, if the leader is not doing his job, how do you expect victory over Syria? And this is the point now. The main point that we learn through King Joash is that great victories are accomplished by zealous men, but they're hindered by weak, halting men, fearful men, lazy men. See the contrast? Great victories are accomplished by zealous men, but hindered by lazy, fearful, halting men. Now, Joash should have known, as I said, that this is a symbolic action. 1 arrow is victory at Aphek. Arrows are going to be more victories. Why do you stop after 3? And Elisha is rightly angry. Now, here's the point. Let me underscore it in a personal application manner. Of course, I include myself, but preaching is always more forceful when you say you. You must be bold and zealous in the service of King Jesus. Right? Isn't that the lesson? Here's a weak namby-pamby 3 arrows and he's done. We don't want to be like Joash. You don't want to be like Joash. If you're a Christian, you're a servant of King Jesus. What kind of men does God use? God uses men and women who are zealous and fervent in their serving. Not weak, not lazy, not halting, not giving up after a little effort, not saying, well, that's good enough. We want to be good soldiers. We must be hot-blooded and not halfway in our commitment to our Savior. So let's draw this out. Examples that I gave earlier, they were zealous men. Abraham, Moses. Of course, Moses didn't start out zealous, but God had some work to do on him, and at the end of the day, he was. David, Daniel, Elijah, Peter, zealous men, greatly used of God. Zealous in faith. Let's draw this out in some particulars. Remember the disciples in the boat, afraid of the storm? What was Jesus' rebuke? Why are you afraid, O men of little faith? So many seem to be content with a little faith. Well, I know I'm saved. I know my sins are forgiven. It's good enough. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, now just sit back. Brethren, we need great faith. We need to trust God for great things. We need great faith as we approach problems and difficulties We need to see the power. One of my favorite verses in Jeremiah's prophecy, where he's questioning God, and the answer comes back: nothing is too difficult for me. Nothing, then, the prophet proclaims, is too difficult for you, my Lord. Absolutely nothing. God is great in power, almighty in His counsel. Nothing is too difficult. We need to trust greatly. We need to be zealous in our fight against sin, and not just be content with a little victory over temptation, but we want to see that sin licked until it's not going to raise its head again. Now, that's not going to happen in this life, because temptations, the minute you think you've got a leg up on it and it's dead, it's going to come back and bite you in the backside. Still, we don't want any halfway victory. Whether that is drunkenness, swearing, and that may have been your habit before you were converted. You had a foul mouth. Whether it is selfishness in relationships, it is complaining and grumbling, whether it is laziness and love of ease, whether it is secret lust, whatever that temptation, don't be satisfied with a little victory. Smite it, and smite it, smite it again, and leave it in its grave. It's one thing to have a besetting sin that trips you when you're not looking. But it's another thing to invite it into your house and say, come here, dwell with me. Be done with it. We need to be zealous in prayer. We heard earlier, God is a prayer-hearing God. And let's be honest, we're lazy in prayer. And we think, well, 5 minutes, good enough. Okay, well, I'll run through my prayer like a prayer wheel. You know, you get it spinning and it just does it. You just run down the list almost automatically. Brother, let's seek to be prayer warriors. Earnest. Think of Elisha on his deathbed. He wasn't doing nothing. He wasn't taking it easy. He was praying for Israel. Prayer warriors, wrestling with the angel of the Lord until He blesses you. Plead with God. May God make you zealous, fervent prayer. Zealous in evangelism. Now, many are zealous in business, and they'll cross town to make $50. And $50 doesn't buy as much as it used to. But they're very zealous to make a buck. But zealous to save souls? Zealous to speak of Christ? Zealous to bring people under the sound of the gospel? Zealous yourself to share what great things God has done for you and had compassion on you? Let somebody else do it. That's why we pay the pastor. Strike! 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 One of my college friends was converted because one of our other friends was just pestering him to death, inviting him to fellowship meetings, Bible studies, and finally couldn't take it. I'll go with you. And he was converted. Well, what if my friend, who became my roommate my second year in college, what if he had said, never mind, it's hopeless. He turned me down 5 times. Give it up. One more time. Sure, I'll come. Strike and strike. Show compassion. Someone had compassion on you. Maybe it was your parents and they didn't give up on you. Maybe it was a college friend, didn't give up on you. Graciously, not shove it down your throatingly, graciously, lovingly, tenderly, compassionately. They need Christ. Zealous in evangelism, zealous in worship. There are a lot of people zealous for Satan. well, I won't name the preacher. I was going to name the preacher, but I'm not sure it was him. Attribute something to a wrong source. But there was one preacher anyway who said that, well, a lot of people are zealous for Satan on Saturday night, making a lot of noise for him. We come to church and hardly hear a mouse, would make more noise than some of the people of God singing. And as a church planter pastor for years, it's somewhat painful for me to see people who have been in our church in the Philippines for 20, 30 years. They hardly open their mouth to sing the praise of God. Come on. Okay, maybe you don't have a great voice. Let everything that has breath. You got breath? Right? I don't see anybody stop breathing yet. You got breath? Use that breath to be zealous for the Lord. Solid joys and lasting treasures, none but Zion's children know. Well, let's thank our God. Be zealous. Now, what hinders us in our zeal? I thought about this. What might have hindered the king? Well, perhaps he was depending on the prophet. He shot the first arrow, it seems like, and we're, by the way, looking at 2 Kings chapter 13, the deathbed of Elisha and this conversation with King Joash of Israel, the striking of the arrows. It seems that with the first arrow that he shot, back in verse 17, Elisha's hands were on his hands. But in the next arrows, verse 18, it seems like Elisha's hands are out of the picture. He says, take the arrows. He took them, and he said to the king, shoot the ground, and he struck it 3 times and stopped. So now the prophet's hands aren't on his hands. Maybe he was saying, well, if you help to it, if your hands are on my hands, then I would shoot more. What would that be in an analogy to our situation? Maybe again, depending on the pastor. Well, pastor, if you go with me, I'll go on visitation. Well, pastor, if you're there with me and you're leading the Bible study, okay, I'll go along. Is it too much dependence on the help of man? Now, one of the jobs of the pastor is to equip the saints for the work of service. And yes, we do that, and we gladly would come alongside you to help train you. But ultimately, the pastor's hands aren't going to be there. Don't lean on men. Look to Christ. Maybe it's despising the means. Maybe the king was saying, this is just a charade. Come on, we're shooting arrows into the ground. What good is that going to do? Maybe in an analogy to that would be similar to saying, look, we preach the gospel and it's not working. And we got to have something else. So we need, a bell choir. And we have a bell choir, that'll surely save people. Come on now. Ding dong. What is that going to do? Except make a bunch of ding dongs out there. But what is the power of God? The gospel preached. The message preached. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 is the power of God, salvation to everyone who believes, Jew and Gentile. It might mean in our day church people and non-church people, raw pagans, utter heathens. That's what Gentiles were in those days. It's God's power. And maybe we don't hold the sword right. Remember in Pilgrim's Progress, and they've got what's his name, Greatheart, and he's got this sword, and he says, that's a lovely blade, and he said, yes, if one but knows how to hold. With this blade he can slay dragons and conquer kingdoms. The blade is the word of God. Do we know how to lay hold? This is a powerful weapon. Do not despise God's means. Laziness is, I think, another hindrance, to be honest. Sometimes in the Philippines you see men just standing on the street corner while women are working, and women work very hard in the Philippines, and men tend to be a bit lazy. And I tell the women, it's part of that XY chromosome thing, I think, that men have a lazy, I think probably women have it in there somewhere, but the female lazy gene seems to be a bit smaller than the male lazy gene. It's in all of us! Right? I was born lazy. I'll tell you. Right now and here, you know the fact about me. I can't hide it. I was born lazy. And you were too, probably. What are you going to do about it? Okay, I did a little work. Okay, I shared the gospel with, I gave out 5 tracts. That's good enough. I knocked on 2 doors. Well, yeah, that'll do for today. Well, it's getting hot. Oh, it's the warm season. It's the rainy season. We can find all kinds of excuses. I'm good at it. Ask me. The dog ate my homework. Oh, that doesn't work anymore. Well, the cat ate it. We'll come up with something. Laziness. Looking for excuses. They're a diamond. Your family. Devotion. Oh, well, it's too late now. Oh, well, there's a good movie on. Brethren, we have responsibilities. Kingdom work. Strike those arrows. Strike again. Keep firing. We need zeal in the kingdom. And laziness, let's be honest, is your enemy. I hope you see it in yourself. I see it in myself. I was born. I don't think I have a non-lazy bone in my body. It's an effort to fight laziness. Was Elisha, and we're going to come to Elisha, was Elisha lazy? No, he was an old man, but he was still there on his deathbed praying and exhorting the king. Laziness is a great enemy of zeal. What else? Lack of faith. We look at the obstacles instead of looking at the power of God. We look at the enemy. We look at the situation and we despair. It's hopeless. Look at all the people outside the church. You know the story of the salesman. One salesman went to Africa, a shoe salesman, and he came back right away and said, it's hopeless. They don't wear. And the next salesman went and he said, give me more shoes. They don't have shoes here. Well, how do you look at it? Do you say, well, these people are lost. They don't care about the gospel. Or do you say, they need the gospel? Lack of faith and satisfaction with just a little. Oh, we had 2 additions to our last year. Oh, we had 1 5 years ago. Brethren, I remember in Spurgeon's biography, I think it was that I read this, that, or maybe it was in lectures to my students, I forget, I'm getting old. But he pointed that a minister of the gospel should never be satisfied without fruit. There should be a longing for conversion. That's the chapter. And on conversion, our aim in lectures to my students. We shouldn't be satisfied with just going on and on with nothing. We cry to God. Don't be satisfied with it. Don't be satisfied with little grace. Don't be satisfied with little victory. And the cure for all of this, and here again we take our cue from Elisha, is zeal for God. Man, I'm tired. Man, it's hard. Man, it's difficult. Excuses. Zeal for God. Now I want to hasten on. I just looked at my watch. I hope you didn't. But we have to look briefly at Elisha. And I said we're going to look at Elisha from student to senior. And I've already said some things, but let's just focus very briefly on him. The first lesson, not the main, we'll come to the main, but a subsidiary lesson is the godly do not escape death. The godly do not escape sickness. The health, wealth, gospel aside, it's a lie that God is going to give you health and wealth. You're going to die. You're going to someday face the sickness, just like Elisha, with the sickness, the illness of which you're going to die. Now, maybe that comes when you're young, maybe it comes when you're old. I had the sad responsibility of burying about 2 weeks ago a 15-year-old girl who died, deteriorated over 2 months with a weak heart. Probably faulty diagnosis along the way, not correct treatment along the way. Rushed to the emergency room, 2 a.m., was dead by 2 the next day in the afternoon. Tragic. The parents, heartbreak for the church. It's a little church planning work, not even a church yet. Heartbreak. But you see, it may well be that this young girl was a believer. She professed faith to her mom when her mom asked her in the last couple of months, "Are you trusting Jesus?" "Yes, Mom." It seemed that she was a believer. But anyway, the point is, the godly do not escape sickness. The godly do not escape death. You could have had a Baal worshiper if they had taken Elisha to the hospital, you might have had a Baal worshiper on the bed, right? The same illness. See, where's the difference? There's a difference. And here's the point. The godly don't escape sickness and death, but the godly maintain spiritual vigor and usefulness all their days until they die. The godly can maintain spiritual vigor and usefulness all their days until they die. And if they don't, it is a tragedy. It does happen, but it shouldn't happen. The godly can. It's possible. And it should be. That the godly maintain spiritual vigor and usefulness all their days until they die. The king visits him. And what does the king say? My father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." He's not idle. He's still intimately involved in kingdom work. The strength of the nation was not their armies, but Elisha's prayers and ministry. So, the grace available to Elisha, the grace that kept him useful till his last breath, is the same grace available for you. Now, many of our older people weren't able to stay through today, which is somewhat of a regret that I have on that, but you all can tell them what you heard, and I understand. Let's see, we have the gizmo here. Yes, this is being recorded for their benefit also. So yes, you hear in the cell phone underneath the pulpit, this is for you too. That grace is here. What? We read the text, Psalm 92, verse 12. And Psalm 92, verse 12 tells us, and I quoted it in my prayer earlier this morning in the prayer time, Psalm 92:12. The righteous man will flourish like the palm tree. He will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still yield fruit in old age. Yeah. They shall be full of sap and very green. To declare that he is upright, he is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Psalm 1:3. And he will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. And in whatever he does, he prospers. And I know it's a temptation for older people, older saints, when health begins to fail, strength seems to vanish so quickly, it just ebbs out of the body, and you think, what can I do? I'm useless. And especially on a deathbed, and you're lying there, and you can't hardly even move, and it's even speaking is difficult and painful, and words are an effort, and it takes everything that you have to speak. What good am I? And to wallow in self-pity and to go down in a spiral of despair and to think my useful days are over and I might as well die, like Elijah said. I'm no better than my fathers. Let's just close the book. Let's shut it up. Let's call it in. We're all done. Call the game. It's quits. We surrender. I remember Pastor Martin, when his first wife was on her deathbed with cancer, and we were able to visit her towards the end. He was going through some of this depression. What good am I? How is my life of any meaning in the kingdom of God. And Pastor Martin told her, and these are important words, dear, you can show the world what it's like for a Christian to die. What is it like for a Christian to die? In despair? In depression? Or firm in faith, trusting the Lord? Like Elisha, still on his deathbed, not able to rise. The chariots of Israel and the horsemen thereof. That was still his position on his deathbed. The king came and wept over him, and he saw a man dying well. Dear elderly saints, do not despair. Do not feel worthless just because you can't do what you used to could do. I can't do what I used to be able to do. I used to preach 3 times on a Sunday, and after a little morning rest, be ready to tackle the world again. Now it takes me probably about till Tuesday afternoon before I'm feeling like I'm hitting on all 4 cylinders. I don't have 8 anymore, but all 4 cylinders again. It takes a while to get back on your feet, and you don't have the energy, you don't have the resilience you used to do. But that doesn't mean you quit. Brethren, the godly, aged saints are useful in the kingdom. I remember as a young man, I was in college, and we visited an old folks in southern Pennsylvania. It was a Presbyterian retirement home. And there were some retired missionaries and retired ministers there in the Reformed Presbyterian denomination in the United States. And I remember this one retired missionary. We went there to cheer up these old people. Foolish. And this old man, he was probably well in his 80s, and he wasn't of great strength, but he was still able to get around. And he sat us down. Oh, come over here. I want to tell you something. And I've been serving Christ. I've been a missionary. But you know, he is a great master and a great Savior. And never waste your life if you serve him. We've got so much more out of that visit than ever we put into it. That older saint was a great blessing to me. I've not forgotten it. And that was 40 years ago. Brethren, older saints, you can be a blessing to the younger ones coming along. Is it worth serving a great master? Is Jesus worthy of your heart's adoration? Do you regret that you ever became a Christian? Do you look back on your life and say, what a waste? No, you don't. Because you know a life spent in the service of Jesus, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, whatever you may be, it is a worthy life to the praise of the glory of His grace. Die well. Die in the praise of Jesus. Let His name be on your dying lips. And you see that the godly exert a life-giving experience after they die. And here we have his bones. And of course our bones, we don't expect our bones to do anything. We don't have relics of our bones. And I know you're not going to dig me up and say, I've got a bone of Steve Hofmaier. The idea is ludicrous. But here is Elisha rather, and this guy gets tossed into his cave burial place, and he comes to life. And you say, what's the analogy of that? I'm waiting to hear this one. Well, in fact, the statement that they being dead yet speak. David served the Lord in his generation, but he still speaks through the Psalms. We have even like Robert Mary McShane, died 29. David Brainerd died age 29. You say, their biographies still stir the hearts of young men and women today to be zealous in the service of Christ. They being dead. Let me ask you, and I don't expect the biography to be written about me. I have no hope, I have no aspiration. I don't care about it. I think it'd be a waste of paper. But let me ask you, When people talk about you when you're gone, and they will, your grandchildren, oh, you remember Grandma? Oh, you remember Grandpa? And as they sit around when the cousins get together and they talk about Grandpa, what would they say about you? What will they say? Good riddance. Old, nasty, cranky lady. Boy, you could never get away with anything around her. Everything you did was wrong. Good riddance. I hope they wouldn't say that. Oh, what a love. I miss Grandma so much. I miss, Grandpa used to have Bible stories with us. Grandpa used to help us with our projects. Oh, I miss Grandpa. I miss Grandma. And she would knit some Afghans for our bed and make quilts for us, and she would tell us Bible stories. And what a loving, I miss, what kind of legacy? Elisha left the legacy, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen thereof. They talked about him when he was gone. Boy, we miss Elisha around here. The sons of the prophets, what are we going to do when our axe head goes in the lake? Where are we going to get our axe head again? When the porridge is poisoned, how are we going to eat the porridge? We miss Elisha. What are we going to do when we're going to have our kids hauled away by the creditors? Where do we run? There was about Elisha a long time. And here's the point. The main point of the life of Elisha as we close. If you want to die well, you need to live well. And if you want to live well, you need to trust in Jesus. Life transformed. Because you see, we look around us. What do we see? Selfishness. We're walking down by the King's home and saw some guys working on a project. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Sun shining, blue sky. It would be more beautiful if we were out on the water. He had his heart set on being out on the water. What's his God? His God's his boat, or his God's the surf. I hope we have better than that. Live well. How is that? Not trusting in the sun God. Trusting in the God, Jesus, Son of God. Transform your life. Take that self-centered, selfish, cold heart, narrow mind, grumbling, complaining, nasty to be around, even the fun-loving, happy-go-lucky, self-centered. Transform. New life, forgiveness, pardon, acceptance with God, all through Jesus Christ. You see, Elisha was a prophet. What does that mean? He knew of the Messiah who was to come. He knew he was the son of Abraham. He knew that through Abraham's seed, all the families of the blessed. Where was his faith? In the Messiah who was to come. Life transformation. Dear friends, as we close our conference, I leave you this question. Young people, you have a life ahead of you. You say, next time, when I'm older, No. You see, when you get to be 70, 80, 90, you're only going to be more of what you are now. You're laying foundation. You're a fornicating, immoral young person. You're going to be a lecherous old man. You're a grumbling, complaining, fault-finding young person. You're going to be a cranky, miserable old person. If you are transformed by the grace of God, serve Him, and the bud blossoms. What a beautiful thing to see an old saint like Elisha. Now that doesn't mean if you're old and you're not converted that it's hopeless, because that's the wonder of grace. God can even take old, grumbly, cranky, nasty, lecherous men and women and make them saints. Grace is powerful stuff. Are you ready to die at all? Not just die well. Elisha on his deathbed knew the God he would face after down his last breath. Do you know it? Are you
confident when you face death. The only way to have confidence in life and death is to know this God. And to know Him, you need to know His Son, Jesus Christ the Savior. That's what Elisha's telling him. He's dying well. He's dying in faith. Be like Elisha. Come to his God through His Son, Jesus Christ.
Lord, we thank you for this man, Elisha, for all that he's taught us in these 2 days. 3 days. We thank you for the lessons, but oh God, we plead as we've been praying, that you would open eyes to these spiritual realities. Open hearts to receive them. Open hearts to receive your Son, to trust Him, to cease from self-confidence. Oh God, do this work. We plead for us that you would make us zealous in your kingdom, zealous in your service, fervent. Oh God, work in our midst. And we ask that as a result of this conference, there would be seen greater zeal and fervor in your churches, the churches represented here. We ask that we would see sinners brought to faith. We ask to see fervent prayer in our prayer meetings. We ask that we would see more zeal in evangelism. We ask that we would see more added to our numbers. Yes, day by day, those who would be saved. Nothing is difficult for you. You are a great God. We are your servants. And we have been here to preach your word. Let it be known that you are God. We are your servants. We have done these things according to your word. Make yourself known in Jesus' name. Amen.